I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Dan Isbell. Over the past 36 years, he's had a whopping 4 completely unambiguous and unique UFO encounters, one of them lasting as much as 5 minutes in duration. They are unique, each of them, and spectacular. He was an elite Top Gun pilot with an illustrious career with the Air Force. However, these encounters were extremely personal and even intimate. They had nothing to do with his career, and they all happened outside the line of duty. It actually really does appear that he is being tracked by the phenomena.
Coming off of the one where it's a direct beam on me, centered on me, not just beside me or around me, it is centered on me. That really communicated something to me, that I was the object of what they were lighting up, and they wanted to draw my attention. Maybe they knew, as I'm thinking, maybe telepathically, I'm just thinking, boy, I'd sure love to see a craft tonight, which I always was thinking when I'm out there.
Dan Isbell, your background is extraordinary. Just give my audience a brief overview of what you did during your illustrious Air Force career.
Graduated from Georgia Institute of Technology and Aerospace Engineering. Stayed there for grad school for a little bit and working on my master's, and then got orders to pilot training. Went to Williams Air Force Base, Arizona for pilot training. After graduating there, I went to fighter lead-in and then F-111 replacement training unit on Mountain Home. Graduated top graduate of both those schools, and then went on to my first operational assignment, which was RAF Upper Heyford. That's an RAF base in the UK that was leased by the Air Force during the Cold War. And I flew F-111Es at RAF Upper Heyford.
Wow.
I went on after that to become an experimental test pilot. And then I did a lot of flight testing work and was later the commander of the 514th Flight Test Squadron at Hill Air Force Base in Utah. And then a number of other schools and jobs, being like a test director for the F-16. I was a program manager for the F-22. And then my final duty in the Air Force as active duty was at the Air Force Research Lab. I was the chief scientist for directed energy weapons.
Before we move into your sightings, I just have one question. You flew, as I understand it, 70 different aircraft. What aircraft did you enjoy flying the most?
Well, it would be the F-16. It's like a magic carpet ride, and I've got quite a bit of test hours in the F-16. In fact, the one you see behind me on the shelf up there that's white with the orange tips is nicknamed Little Precious. It's currently now in the Hill Aerospace Museum with my name on the canopy rail, since I was the last commander of the 514th to fly it before it was retired and placed in the museum status.
Let's jump right into the December 1980 night at RAF, that's Royal Air Force, Upper Heyford in Oxfordshire, England. The sighting you've kept quiet for 45 years. Where exactly were you when it began?
Well, I had just completed a week's worth of sitting alert, being the youngest pilot in the squadron. At that time, I was given the the holidays to sit alert on, so I was sitting alert during Christmas Day, but changeover was on Friday, December the 26th, and departing the base that evening, I was driving home on what was known then as the Middleton Stony to Bicester Road, and it intersects with a smaller town called Chesterton, just before the larger city of Bicester. And in Chesterton, there was an off-base housing for many of the pilots and navigators and various enlisted, because the base itself did not have enough room for all the personnel to be housed on the base. So it's about a 10 to 15 minute drive, depending on traffic. This particular night, I was the only thing on the road. That road goes by the Bicester Golf Course, which is a course I was familiar with. I had played golf on it before. And so I was very familiar with where I was when this happened. And as I'm driving a 1980 red Corvette, which I had shipped over to England, and it had very slope back glass, a lot of good rear visibility, and something caught my attention in the rearview mirror as these very brilliantly changing lights that were quite unusual were rapidly approaching from behind me, but it was clear that they weren't down at road level, but rather up above the tree line and coming to a position just to my right. So I'm in the, left-hand drive American car, but I'm on the left-hand lane, so I'm literally closest to the ditch on the left, as the other lane going the other way would be to my right. But there was no traffic, so I pulled across, stopped my car in the dirt on the side of this road. And what had happened is this craft had zipped in and then just instantaneously stopped. It didn't slow down gradually. It didn't bank. It didn't turn. It did no maneuvers except going in a straight line very fast and did an instantaneous stop. As I rolled down my windows, I could hear no sounds at all from it. Of course, it was very intriguing, so I shut off my car, got out the driver's door, stood there beside my vehicle as I tried to analyze and say, what is this? And being a fully mission-ready fighter pilot, in fact, award-winning Top Gun fighter pilot within the unit I was in, we were trained and constantly tested for aircraft recognition, and that would include all of the then Soviet Union aircraft that we might have to face, helicopters, airplanes, anything that flew, transports, as well as everything that NATO flew. So being an aerospace engineer, the behavior of this was not like anything that I had witnessed before. It didn't have any kind of propulsion that you have something streaming out the back to carry you forward. There was no signs of any kind of way that it was being, maintaining itself stationary. No rotor blades, no control surfaces, just a triangle about 50 feet long, probably a little narrower than that in width because it wasn't an equilateral triangle. It seemed to be a little bit curved at the front end, and all around the base of it were these, let's call them lights, but they were constantly changing, and the colors weren't like blinking into different modes. They were blending around the base of the craft. I would describe almost like a plasma field. And so I probably spent, I would say, 5 minutes standing there just staring at it in a bit of shock and awe. And then I wanted to get a closer look. So I walked around behind my car, walking across the grass towards the woods where the golf course was. And there was a line of trees that are like guard trees so that, if someone hits the ball wrong, it hopefully will be caught by the trees and will go out into somebody's windshield. And then beyond that was a golf green. And I knew that approximately where the craft was, having been on the golf course and played before. And it appeared to be on the golf course, over the golf course, I should say. And as I started walking towards it, it responded to me looking at it as I'm walking toward it and started to lower itself down toward the golf course itself. And it was at that moment that I realized, I don't know if it would be a good idea for me to get any closer and hang around in the situation because I'm on a top secret SCI clearance. I'm on a program called Personnel Reliability Program. So we have psychological exams and so forth that are a regular part of that duty. And for me to have been found seeing this, what I would say at the time was a UFO, that could have been career ending. Would have been easy for them to just send me to the psychologist, psychiatrist, have them mark me crazy, And there goes my Air Force flying career, just as it's getting started. So I quickly reversed course, ran back to my Corvette, cranked it up, and headed straight home and never told a soul about it. But it was an unforgettable kind of experience.
What do you think it was interested in? What do you think drawed this craft to the location?
Well, I think because of some other things that I didn't know at the time, but have come out. I saw Linda Moulton Howell in her Earth Files on the 22nd of February in 2023. She had a show where the person wasn't on camera, so you didn't see their face. I think they had his voice a little bit disguised, and he went by the pseudonym of Smith Jones. And he was apparently a sergeant who witnessed this same craft on the base over the nuclear storage area. Well, he was in the nuclear storage area. Initially, the craft was at eye level to him because there's a bit of a hill where the storage area where he was. And he was guarding some weapons on a trailer, waiting for the weapons personnel to come and basically take charge of the weapons and place them in storage. So he's guarding it with his rifle on his shoulder, sort of like a sentry. And he said he walked forward, back. He's looking all around to make sure there's no threats. And he just continued to do that. And he turned one time, and as he turned around, now this craft, there had been no noise for it to get there, and it wasn't there the last time he walked the lengths of this small trailer. And suddenly he's just looking head on into this craft. He had a view at that point from the front and even the top of the craft, and he described it as large transparencies in the front with light that emanated from the floor toward the ceiling, not the ceiling toward the floor. He didn't report seeing any beings in the craft, but it startled him because it was really close, probably within 150 feet of him. And that's the closest that I got to the one that I saw that, kind of matched that description. He also, as he was with the people, there was another person that witnessed it and then got scared and ran away, drove away, leaving him out there by himself. And finally, the weapons folks came. They took possession of the weapons, put them into the weapons storage area. And then as they came out of the weapons storage area, the craft was directly above them, directly over the storage area. And he got a very close look at the bottom part of the craft, looking straight up into it, and then watched it move away.
That storage area, was it housing nuclear missiles or something like that?
Yeah, tactical nuclears, weapons, which we were, the public wasn't aware of that. The Ministry of Defense certainly was, but they were there just in case World War III broke out and Europe was being overwhelmed by the Soviet Union. And so we called them just special weapons. And our pat line, if anybody asked, we would say, I can neither confirm nor deny. So didn't force us to tell a lie, but not to admit that, what they were. Of course, the base closed down after the Cold War and became a museum now. The runways and the concrete hangars and stuff, the bomb-proof hangars, all that still stand. And then they've got, all kinds of activities that they do there, and they have a museum set up for the history of the base. But at the time, it was a very active base, and I was stationed there for 4.5 years.
Knowing what you know about Air Force bases and how they monitor their airspace, do you think either of these Air Force installations were monitoring these craft and knew they were there?
I don't have any evidence of that because, again, I certainly didn't talk to anyone about it. I wasn't about to say, hey, anybody else see this thing? Okay. But there was nothing that was publicly told to any of us that were there. I would suspect that the radar operators may have caught some sign of this at some point. But I don't know, how the craft could have also had cloaking so that it didn't show up on radar, but who would know that? I don't know. I would love to have seen more than what has been captured so far, but with the stigma, most folks were not um, about to come out with this. Now, the sergeant that saw it on the base, he did report it to the officials and was told to keep quiet about it. So he waited until, many, many years later. Obviously, he came out quasi-public, not with his real name and so forth, but he told the story under Linda Moulton Howe's program on that 22nd of March of 2023. And I did write to her because she asked if anybody else had had a sighting on or near RAF Upper Hayford, if they would please send her a proton mail. So I didn't have a proton mail account, but I went ahead and created one. And I sent her some information about what I had seen. And then she asked if she could have my phone number. So I did give my phone number. And then the following week, I was teaching directed energy weapons in classified settings in San Antonio, Texas. And that first night, the Monday night of that week, when I got back to my hotel room, my cell phone rang, and it was Linda Moulton Howe, and we had about a 2-hour conversation. She wanted me to agree to do what Smith Jones had done and go on with a disguised name and pseudonym, and maybe disguise my voice, alter it somehow. But I told her because I was still on top secret kind of classification and doing work for the DoD, teaching directed energy weapons to all the different services, and actually sometimes traveling to Europe, or I've taught at UCOM and AFRICOM and Indo-Pacific Com, and I didn't want to have anything interrupt or maybe have my clearance taken away, so I couldn't fulfill the contract that I was on. So I told her at that point I wanted her to have the information, but I wasn't ready to go public. And I waited until after I retired fully from my second career, being a technology integration consultant and a senior instructor for directed energy weapons in December of 24.
So I have to ask, a lot of people who have sightings, especially close encounters like this, they report that weird things happen to them afterward. Poltergeist activity, lights turning on, TVs turning on, hearing knocking. It's well recorded within the UFO historical record and literature. So I just have to ask, I know it's an awkward question, but did you experience any high strangeness after any of your sightings?
Well, I didn't initially, and I was pretty busy working, more than full time. I had plenty of additional duties, and I was doing a lot of engineering work on the side that wasn't part of my job. But I think I sent you some information, so you've got some details on that. But I moved from the place that I lived near Mister into a farmhouse that was over 450 years old, had been an old coach inn on a Roman road. And that house was pretty unusual. Anyway, I can't say that there weren't noises and stuff, but it was an old house built out of stones with a slate roof and no insulation. So it was just a very cool, unusual experience. And I had to agree when the person that recommended me for the house was departing the United Kingdom with orders to another assignment. And it turns out that the barrister who controlled the house, because it was a historical property, only trusted whoever was recommended. So I got recommended, and I said, yeah, I would accept under all the conditions, and won't make any modifications to the house and so forth. And I had to agree to host all the wing parties out there every year. So did that, and it was a great experience. But I don't recall any what I would call strangeness or poltergeist then. But as I've shared with you, that was not my only encounter with the strange.
Yeah, and then getting into that, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, your second sighting was in 1990 at Edwards Air Force Base?
Yes, I had gone through the schoolhouse as a student at a test pilot school at Edwards in 84, graduating in the summer of 85. It's a 12-month course. And then I went on to my first test pilot assignment flying F-16s and F-111s and testing weapons at Eglin Air Force Base, Florida. Then I went off to an Air Command and Staff College school and did another master's at night during that school. And then I got assigned to be an instructor at the test pilot school. I was there from 89 to 91. And I had a motorcycle that I used to like to ride out at the end of the day when it's a nice dark night. Most of the time it was clear skies, very dry, no humidity there. And if you got away from the street lights and housing lights and building lights and runway lights and so forth of the base, there's a road going toward what they call the South Gate that is closer to Lancaster, California. And as you rode out there past South Base, which also had classified work going on there, you could, after a couple of hills, you could be in such a light, quiet area that it was a great place to stargaze. And I always loved, especially when you got just a completely unobstructed view of the full Milky Way, I always found it fascinating just to go out there and be in that quietness and stillness and just contemplate the universe. So on this particular night, I was doing that, and there was like no clouds anywhere. It was a perfectly clear night, and suddenly over my head from behind me, this wedge-like shape started to blot out all the stars. So it was just blackness. And it was quite shocking as it happened because I wasn't expecting that. No noise whatsoever. And the craft was as black as the deep night. There was no lights, nothing I could see feature-wise on it, but it was huge. And I felt a little bit of electrostatic tingle on my skin. And that plus the plasma-like lights from the 1980 thing is why I began to contemplate. I wonder if electromagnetic fields are a part of the way these craft work. But, I have no inside knowledge on any of that. I've never been part of any reverse engineering or read into any of those kind of programs. But I'd had an experience at the base on Friday nights after a hard week of school. A lot of times some of the instructors and students and other instructors would gather at the officers club at Edwards. And this one particular night, I had been theorizing in my mind how you could technically make an aircraft invisible to visual light, the spectrum that our eyes could see or the telescopes could see. And it was just a theory that I had come up with in my own brain. And all of a sudden I got grabbed by the shoulders, and these men in suits said, "Sir, you need to come with us." And so I was escorted out of the bar and into a private room, and they said, "How do you know about that?" And I said, "Know about what?" And they said, "What you were talking about." I said, "I don't know anything about it. It was just me theorizing in my engineering brain how you might be able to pull that off." And they said, "Well, we got a program on that, and don't ever talk about it again. It's highly classified." So I said, "Well, okay, I won't." I never did. I said,
So they were sitting near you when you were discussing this openly?
they must have been in the room somewhere, or they were picking it up maybe remotely.
Why would they be monitoring? Why would they be monitoring you if they were monitoring you?
I don't think they were monitoring me in particular. I think they were just monitoring all of us.
Because it was in close proximity to the Air Force Base?
Well, it was on the Air Force Base.
Oh, on the Air Force Base. Got you.
It was on the Air Force
So
Base.
you think it was like a security detail, just seeing what people are talking about?
I think they were actually the OSI because they weren't in uniform. The OSI wore civilian clothes, the Office of Special Investigations, and they handled very secretive work, for the Air Force. And I think that's who the individuals were. I wouldn't call them men in black, but I think they were concerned that something in probably a covert, unacknowledged special access program had been breached, because I certainly wasn't on the list to be part of that. I wasn't cleared into that program, nor did I have any knowledge that such a program even existed. But yeah, they were concerned that there had been a security breach in the program, and they told me to keep those thoughts to myself from then on about what I was talking about.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's interesting that Dylan. I don't know. I'm sure you watched the most recent UFO hearing that took place on September 9th. But here's a quote from Dylan Borland from that hearing. I'll give you the quote because it relates to some of your own experiences. He said, "I'm under this for about, I think it was the 100-foot equilateral triangle, as he recalled. He says, I'm under this for about 2 to 3 minutes. And then the center light flashes 2 to 3 times, no sound. It immediately shoots up to commercial jet level minimum, in my opinion. And I immediately feel static electricity all over my body. And you felt static electricity when that wedge started to come in proximity to you. So it's really interesting how many, and that's just 2 people, but if you look at the UFO literature, tons of people report when they come in close proximity to these craft, they do feel static electricity."
Yeah. So that's very interesting. And I certainly listened to his testimony very intently, because as you can imagine, with the 4 sightings that I've had in my lifetime, and they were all relatively close encounters, the subject doesn't ever leave your brain. You're always thinking about it. And so I have been following, not only your channel, but just about every channel out there that's on YouTube. And I followed the Weaponized from Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, and I did go talk to them actually in February 10th of 2023, even before the Linda Moulton Howe thing had occurred. My youngest stepson is a professional musician, and he also writes musical scores for movies. So he's quite often out in Hollywood when he's not on tour with his band. And because Jeremy Corbell also is sort of a movie producer in his own right, he became friends with Jeremy, knows Jeremy, and one day Jeremy said, "Hey, have you ever seen anything weird up in the sky?" And he said, "No, but I think my stepdad has." She said, "But I have no idea what it was or when it was, because he won't talk about it, but just that he's seen things." And they said, "You think he's willing to come out and talk to us?" And he said, "I don't know, I'll call him and find out." So he did, and I said, "Sure, okay, when do they want me?" And so we got tickets. I flew with myself and my wife, who is his mother, and we went out to LA, and then we got last minute directions on where to go, and I took an Uber, and I went and met with George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, and they invited my stepson to come along too. So it was the 4 of us there. He was pretty big-eyeballed and shocked as he listened to me account all these things. And after the 3rd encounter that I told at the table there, and I did explain to him right off the bat that I'm not ready to go public yet. I don't want to be on Weaponized. I don't want to be on public, and I explained why, and they agreed to that, and they never outed me at all. But I said, I'm just sharing this privately with you because you asked. And after the 3rd encounter that I talked about, which was in 2014, George Knapp leaned forward in the table and he said, "They're tracking you." That really gave me goosebumps. Like, who's tracking me? Why are they tracking me? So I did not tell them after that. I got so spooked by that. And I'm a little reluctant to tell about the orb sighting, but that's the most recent thing that happened after we moved into this house that I'm in right now.
Is that your most recent sighting?
It is. And that was
before you go into that, I want to ask you something, because I want to bring up something else about Dylan Borland's testimony.
Yeah.
I'm just going to read off the quote because it's similar to what you saw in your 1980 sighting, and I quote, "But on top of the craft," I'm not sure if he meant on top because I only think he saw the bottom, but anyways, "but on top of the craft was this gold lava plasma, some type of fluid going over and around the craft. So, what do you think this plasma is? Because you saw plasma in your sighting. Borland saw plasma in his sighting. I know a guy named Finn Hanley who saw something like that, similar, also with a triangular craft. So, what do you think? What do you think that's accomplishing for the flight capabilities of these exotic technologies?
Well, I think I'm a big student of the electromagnetic spectrum, obviously having worked in as a chief scientist for it and then later taught. That to me, a lot of those effects that we do with high power microwaves and high energy lasers can create plasma. And there are lots of ways in the lab that we can create plasma. Plasma being that fourth state of matter where ions, that would be the positive charged core of a nucleus of an atom, is separated from its electrons. So you have very conductive separated charge here of negative and positive. And plasmas can exist in the dark mode where they're not visible at all. And that's what space is really filled with, is plasma in the dark mode. And there can be plasma in the glow mode, and we've all seen that, like fluorescent light bulbs and neon light bulbs are plasma in the glow mode. And then you've probably, most people have seen like an arc welder where you have to have the visor and all on. It creates plasma in the arc mode, which is like a lightning bolt. That's plasma in the arc mode. And that exists in space as well. So if something is producing high amounts of electromagnetic energy, especially if it's cyclical or, some sort of a stream that's rotating very rapidly, an after effect of that can be that it may have charged some of either the surrounding atmosphere or the craft itself to create plasma in the glow mode. If it goes much more than that, then you've got, plasma in the arc mode, and that's going to try to discharge in one way or another. But in the glow mode, it's still very powerful energy, and I don't have any inside knowledge to say that that's connected to any of how these craft work. But if you think about in the physics nature, if you take the force of gravity, which is the weakest force of the defined ones in our science, and compare it to the force of electromagnetism, it's not just like 2 or 3 times greater. Electromagnetic force is 10 to the 39th power greater than gravity. That's 1 with 39 zeros times the force of gravity represents electromagnetic force. And therefore, in my view, that is more than likely related to how the craft overcome gravity in some fashion, that they are able to produce enough electromagnetic force that in some cases it may literally cancel the inertia of the craft and allow them to move in these ways that are very mysterious to us, right? Because we don't have anything that's acknowledged. There's out of the 70 different craft I have flown, some of them are behind me here, including the U-2 up to the edge of space where you can see the curvature of the Earth. Those craft operate all pretty similarly. We have a jet engine that throws thrust out the back, and the action reaction, that's based back to Newton's law, right? Action and reaction. These craft aren't doing that, and so how are they moving themselves? And all planets have a net charge. The planets are a net negative charge, the sun a net positive charge. So in many respects, we're all kind of electromagnetically connected to each other. In fact, I don't know where you live, if you saw any of the northern lights this recent with the 5.1 flare that came out of the sun from one of the sunspots. It followed a 1.3 and a 1.7 and a 1.3 magnitude and then a 5.1, which is very strong. And as that energy hits the Earth's magnetic field, it starts to penetrate at those force levels and it actually energizes what we see. The northern lights or even the southern lights, the Australia and, down in the South, the South Pole, we call those the Australis, and they call the northern lights the Aurora Borealis, and then the Aurora Australis. The Aurora Borealis that we've been seeing, it's not normal for it to be visible. I guess up in the panhandle of Florida, they even saw it in Florida, of all things, saw it in Texas. But what is that? The northern lights, as we call them, is plasma. And the plasma, as it interacts with the atmosphere, depending on what level of the atmosphere it's reacting most to, produces a complete array of colors, almost like a rainbow of colors. And again, it's a direct action of plasma with air molecules that are causing that display. And therefore, if we have a plasma display, when we look at the northern lights or the southern lights, then could some of this plasma effect on some of these craft that have been reported, and the ones that I've seen, can that be a clue as to how they're operating? I don't know the answer to that, but it makes me wonder as a scientist and as an engineer.
So your third sighting was in 2014. I take it that was your most recent sighting. Could you go into that sighting?
Actually, the most recent was in
Okay, so do the
2016. So 2014.
Okay, do the 2014 first, and then we'll go into the 2016 one.
Okay, so now many years later, and I'm living in a completely different park. The last sighting before that had been at Edwards in 1990. And then I moved around a lot of places, and I'm in Florida at that point, living in a very remote wilderness area. And one of the beauties was that there were no light pollution there. So on a clear November night, you could see the full Milky Way. And just like had been something I loved to do since childhood, we had a nice hot tub out back. It was a 2-person hot tub. My wife and I were in it. I was just gazing at the sky. I was watching some satellites go by because they're very easily, identified as satellites because they move in a line and they move at a speed that's consistent. But nothing unusual. And my wife finally, she said, well, I'm getting kind of shriveled up, so I'm going to go back in and shower off and get ready for bed. And I said, okay, I'm going to hang out for a little bit long because it's such a beautiful night. So I'm just looking at the constellations, contemplating the universe. Saw nothing while I'm looking up at that point. Then I look down at my hands and they're getting shriveled. So I said, it's time to get in. So I climb out. This is sometime probably around midnight. And didn't have a watch out there with me. But anyway, it's late. And as I got out and grabbed my towel and I'm standing beside the hot tub, as I'm drying off, suddenly I just like everything is lit up and it's reflecting off we had some white marble looking rocks under the hot tub in that area. And it's reflecting off the building that's next door. We had an outdoor building there. And at first I think, gosh, has somebody snuck in out here and they're playing a prank on me? So I did look around in the horizontal and see if there's anybody out there. Is it light coming from any direction? It wasn't. So immediately when I ruled that out, I said, well, it's got to be coming from above. Where could it be? So as I looked up, it looked to me, having been working with lasers for so long, like perhaps like a defocused laser, because the beam was pretty big and encompassed me and the hot tub, but no bigger than that circle. And it was almost perfectly circular on the ground, meaning that the thing was nearly directly overhead. And as I looked up through it, it kind of, maybe as it's hitting stuff in the atmosphere, it's got this like speckly looking nature to it, but it wasn't hard on the eyes. It wasn't too bright to look at. And because the beam went up to such a fine point, but yet spread out the way it did, it looked like a laser type light that was not perfectly focused to maintain diffraction limited. A laser beam will stay pretty tight all the way down. Had it been a single beam at my feet or something that was really small, I would assume, well, it's got to be a laser. Had it been even broader coverage than that, well, that's a spotlight. But this was something in between, which makes me say perhaps it was a defocused laser. At any rate, when I looked up, I realized that's a craft, and it's almost directly above me. And it was probably hard to say. It's sort of, really dark night, no moon out, and I would say that between 200 and 300 feet would be my best estimate, just looking at the way the angles of the light around me came up.
Could you make out the shape of the craft, or you just couldn't see it, but you knew that it was about that height above
Yeah,
you?
couldn't make out a shape because while the light didn't hurt my eyes, it overwhelmed, and anything above that wasn't, shining an even brighter light would have not have been visible because I'm looking straight up through this beam because it's centered on me, right on.
How long did this happen?
Well, again, apart from the fact that it took me a few moments to realize what was going on and looking around for somebody out there playing a prank, from the moment I realized that it must be coming from above and it had to be a craft because there is nothing above. There's no street light above us or anything like that could come on and make this. It's just a wilderness. And there's the Ocala National Forest, probably less than a quarter of a mile away. And there's the Ocklawaha River on this side. And it's just old growth trees and stuff. But it was a clearing where we put the hot tub because we wanted to be able to really see a good view of the night sky. And so from the moment that I looked up and consciously thought, that's a craft, that original light went out, and whatever was there was encircled at that point by a sphere of what looked like a plasma ball. And then moments later, that plasma ball more than doubled, and then it went one more time. These are not gradual increases. They're like quantum levels, 1, 2, 3. And when it got that largest level, you could tell a little bit that it was starting to accelerate rapidly to the west, but in a fraction of a second, it just disappeared. Made no noise, left no wake, made no sound while it was there. So that's the point after telling about that George Knapp said they're tracking you. And it started to make me wonder because I never even thought of that.
Wait a minute. So you think George was referencing whatever was piloting that, whatever is behind these sightings was tracking you? Is that what he was referencing? Or was he referencing like governments are tracking you, or the U.S. government is tracking you?
Well, the government certainly had really close tabs on me, and I've had plenty of jobs during my active duty career where I was polygraphed regularly just because of the nature of the unacknowledged special access program work. And I've been to Area 51, not S4, but nothing to do with any kind of UFO or reverse engineering programs, all related to aircraft and advanced aircraft and weapons related to those aircraft, conventional kind of stuff. But nonetheless, the Air Force does keep extraordinarily close tabs when you're carrying a top secret clearance, and you have to go through a complete review and all kinds of stuff every year. But if you're doing a special unacknowledged SAP, special access program, those are such that even the code name for the program is classified, and you have to sign non-disclosure agreements that you will not disclose anything about it. And I've been in a number of those, so I'm aware of how tight the security is. And on ones that are of the most sensitive nature, there are regular polygraphs that are done. And so after retiring, I had to sign final things to release from those programs, but I'm still on a lifetime non-disclosure. And I wouldn't even want to talk about any of those because national security is at stake with those. It has nothing to do with UFO UAP, which is what makes me not a whistleblower, because I've never been on the intel side or in these programs.
Yeah, I mean, you're a witness. These all happened like this wasn't within like a government operation apparatus. This was just you living your life and encountering these mysterious things.
Yeah, so I got the feeling that he wasn't talking about the government's tracking me, because I know they're tracking me. They got close tabs on anybody with a top secret. And I'm doing a lot of work for them, and I'm getting paid very well to do that work. So it's not like that would be a surprise. But this did not seem like, oh, well, the government owns these craft and they're doing spot checks on me all over the world, no matter where I live. So I took that as whatever the non-human intelligence is, for some reason,
Is interested in you.
was interested in me.
Yeah.
And I would say, even on that first encounter, being a fighter pilot and later from a test pilot, but being an engineer, a scientist kind of brain, and being a fighter pilot, flying a Mach 2.5 at altitude, Mach 1.2 at low altitude, F-111, the first variable swing wing aircraft we ever built and produced. That attraction was, yeah, I'd like to go out there and hop in this thing and see if they'll let me take it for a spin.
Well, David Fravor said the same thing. He wants to get in the Tic Tac and fly it.
Yeah, I think that's normal for a Top Gun fighter pilot to want to do that kind of thing, because, when you, at that point, I have not flown that many airplanes, many different types, but as I became a test pilot, I got to fly airplanes all over the world, and you get to log first pilot time in those and fly the front seat or the left seat or whatever's the control seat for the bird with no simulators and no other training. You just go out there and figure it all out because you're a trained test pilot.
I have to ask you this. It's a little bit an awkward question, but have you ever experienced missing time?
Not that I'm aware of. Not most people have missing time. They've looked at their watch and then they look and it's 5 hours later or something. I haven't had missing time that I'm aware of. I certainly wasn't gone long enough. If I had missing time, I'd been taken aboard that craft for my life, recognizing I wasn't there. I went back in and I did tell her about that one at the hot tub, because I said, "Man, did you leave too early? You won't believe what just happened to me out there." And she was just in shock about it because, she didn't get to see it. She was in the shower or something, getting ready for bed. So, yeah, I have no explanation for why I've had the sightings I have, but coming off of the one where it's a direct beam on me, centered on me, not just beside me or around me, it is centered on me. That really communicated something to me, that I was the object of what they were lighting up, and they wanted to draw my attention. Maybe they knew, as I'm thinking, maybe telepathically, I'm just thinking, boy, I'd sure love to see a craft tonight, which I always was thinking when I'm out there, but, it would just be the mundane satellites or whatever. It was not, normally that didn't come to fruition, and I wasn't employing any kind of CE5 techniques or anything like that. I'm not psionic that I know of. But when that happened, and then we moved from there to where we live now, so 2014 to 2016, February of 2016, we're in this house. And probably a few months after that, and we've got a back lanai with sliding glass doors. And it looks out onto some really beautiful old growth tree woods. There's no houses behind us. There is a retention pond that sometimes got water in it and sometimes not. So it's sort of a part-time lake and other times dry. And this night it was pretty close to dry. And what caught my attention is there was a bright object, and it came zorching downwards, and then it stopped just above the far end of the retention pond. And then it just started moving along at about the height of where my house sits above the retention pond. And as it was moving at one speed, and then it turned the corner and stopped right behind my house. And it's the first time I'd ever seen a ball of plasma, no other shape to it. The door's open, there's no sound, there's no quadcopter rotors. There's nothing. It's just this big ball of plasma. I don't know, probably 5 feet in diameter. and it's maybe 70 feet from me at that point. And I kind of got the chills about it because something about it made me feel like it might be malevolent. Don't know why, but just in my inner self, that one scared me.
What color was it?
White, pure white.
White. Wow. So you felt like you were sensing something from it psychologically that wasn't necessarily originating from your own mind, but like you were receiving some kind of feeling that you think it might have been emitting to you.
Possibly. All I know is that my fascination for it was very brief. And I shut and locked the door and drew the blinds across the sliding glass doors and had the conscious thought, I hope it doesn't come in here. So that was the last time I've had an encounter.
And how close do you think it was at its closest when this occurred to you?
70 feet.
And how big? And how big?
Close.
And how big was it?
I would estimate from where it was out of the middle of the retention pond, it was probably 5 feet, maybe 10 feet in diameter, but it looked like larger than a basketball or something. And it was just pure white, just this sphere of plasma.
Wow.
I'll call it a plasma sphere, but it was literally glowing, pure white ball of light.
I have a question for you because you have a scientific engineering mind, and you've worked for special access programs, furthering technologies. So, and you've also flew the U-2, which flies extremely high. So my question to you is, using your scientific engineering mind, I've wondered with these encounters over nuclear bases, like, why are these craft going so low? Because it seems like they're so sophisticated. They could easily get all the intelligence, all the information they need, and wouldn't need to be so close to the ground. So I'm thinking maybe they want to be seen, that they could, like, whatever operation they're doing, they could probably do it at 50,000 feet altitude or higher, but they choose not to. Do you think there's any plausibility to that?
Possibly, the core radioactive element, plutonium, that's in those weapons, you can go up to them and put your hand on them and they're warm. So they're emitting something. Radiation is coming out, even though it's so encased in that. But it's at a low enough level that, it wasn't dangerous for us to touch the weapon and feel it. But is it that they're trying to ascertain how many and what type, and I'm sure whatever sensors that are being used, there seems to be a worldwide common thread that they like to appear over nuclear power stations. And of course, that's a fission reaction. But they've had a lot of interest in our thermonuclear weapons tests. The fusion bomb, is an immense additional amount of energy compared to a fission device. And we've done, Hiroshima and Nagasaki with fission weapons, and then pretty soon we were able to crack fusion and how to do that. And I understand why all of that is very highly classified. And if these craft are emitting radiation, it may be that it's under the Department of Energy where a lot of this is actually being maintained for security, because they would have the right to do that, and then that would allow the Department of Defense to kind of claim we know nothing. But I don't know how all that works. I'm just saying that the Q clearance for being inside of the nuclear, how that works and how you're designing new weaponry that uses that form of energy, seems to be of a very intense interest to whatever this is.
Do you have a hypothesis as why UFOs seem to be so intensely interested in nuclear technology, whether it's missile bases or even power plants?
I think there's an awareness that we as humans now have so much of this that we could destroy this entire planet. And I think there's good evidence that some of these entities, non-human intelligences, are living among us. Some under the oceans, some perhaps in deep underground locations. Some may be ferrying back and forth to somewhere. I'm not saying that every craft that comes has done interstellar travel to get here in that moment, but clearly they have a command of technology that goes way beyond at least what our unclassified science is. Now, there may be people that have figured out a science that would allow them to reverse engineer and create craft like this. The most glaring one that comes to mind is all the information that's out about the TR-3B Astra. And that was claimed that it was really an outgrowth of the Germans' Die Glocke, which was the bell, flying bell thing. And they were trying to do a spinning mercury plasma. And the scientists that we were able to bring back from Germany after the end of World War II included people like Werner von Braun, who was, the brains behind the whole Apollo and the moon thing. So I think some of those people that we brought back under Operation Paperclip were perhaps very familiar with at least how far the work had gone there. And if we're doing the same technique, which, again, I'm just referencing most of what I've seen that Edgar Fouché put out before his death, the rotating mercury into a plasma and getting it so fast that it becomes superconductive sort of makes sense that you can create a field, a bubble, if you will, around the craft to a point. Obviously, his claim was they're only about successful in eliminating 89% of the mass of the craft. But that's a lot. So now if your craft is doing nearly 90-degree pure angle turns, what would that be at various speeds? Well, so that craft would be capable of doing something that pretty much resembled that kind of turn. It wouldn't have a notable turn radius because to the people inside, if you're reducing their inertia, their mass, to something that's 1/10 of what it normally is, and a human body can pull 9 Gs, well, that could be in effect a 90 G turn that humans couldn't survive, but they could if you created that kind of environment. So as a scientist, an engineer, well, my brain's always working like that. I can't turn it off, much to my wife's distress. She'd prefer that I was just more inclined to piddlywinks or go fishing, but I'm constantly, well, I guess you'd say I'm information addicted. The Air Force sent me through 12 different universities and colleges during my career. And they put all of that education to direct and proper use throughout my career. But then it kind of turns you into a person that's always in a continuous learning mode. That's why I will spend hours and hours reviewing other people's videos and the information that comes out to look for clues, to look for exactly what you're talking about. I think we're all curious on the same thing. We want to know, what is it about these craft that makes them defy science as we currently have it? I kind of left the Big Bang cosmos thing a long time ago when they started adding all these other made up things. Like, oh, well, we got to add inflation now because it must have expanded at greater than the speed of light. So we're going to call that inflation. And then, Vera Rubin sees stars that aren't rotating in accordance with the gravitational equations. Therefore, there must be extra mass out there, so let's create dark matter. Even the creation of the black hole, which Einstein initially said, I think that's a misuse of my equations. I never allowed myself to divide by zero to get infinities, infinite density at an infinitely small space, the singularity. And what we know now from a lot of work, the James Webb Space Telescope is showing us because of its power, and it's all in that it's got a very broad infrared band. And so it's looking there in the areas where you would see electrical energy and the effect of that. And I think we're seeing that, yeah, none of the stuff out of the James Webb, which is supposed to finally prove the beginning of the Big Bang and find all the answers. And every time they get a new image from it, it just puzzles you. Well, how can this be? That doesn't make, that's not what our theory says. So between black holes, dark matter, dark energy, and again, Einstein, I think, made one big error in his thought experiment, though, I mean, his equations are pretty amazing mathematics. I don't know if you've ever delved into them, but to go through the general equations of general relativity is almost like going back to the James Clerk Maxwell's original equations for electromagnetism. They're pretty difficult mathematically to absorb, and you have to do a lot of study just to be able to go in and do work in those. Not that I'm an astrophysicist by any stretch, but I used to read about that and study it on my own when I was going through Georgia Tech. So I just find that Einstein said gravity is the only force out there. And so if everything is based on gravity, which is the weakest force that we know, then it should operate in a certain way, and it's not. And that's why they keep inventing what I like to term as garden gnomes. All of these different things they come up with. How long have they studied dark energy or dark matter? Probably 20 years or more, 25 years. Spent $19 billion. There's 53 different theoretical things it could be, and they've tested all those, and this is how much data has come out, 0. So I'm hoping that we get to a point where science can move beyond the stagnation that it's had for the last 100 years.
Well, let me ask you this, and this will be the last question. Do you think disclosure would help facilitate moving beyond that stagnation, number one? And number two, do you think the U.S. government should be transparent about our state in the universe, that we're not alone?
Yes, on both of those. I definitely believe, and hopefully we will have this coming soon. I think I, like most people that haven't, that weren't invited to some of the premiere showings of Age of Disclosure, I'm really, I've got a big put up on my calendar for November 21st. So I'm anxious to watch it. I'm anxious to see what all is revealed there. And as we all know, Senator Marco Rubio was very briefed on this, and now he is not only the Secretary of State, but he's basically running the whole classified part of the White House. And I would say that his influence directly on the president may at some point result in some level of formalized disclosure. I don't think it's ever going to be a complete disclosure of everything. And I say this because if we have broken the code on some of this reverse engineering, but we're just trying to make sure nobody realizes that, I would say that anything that we've managed to create out of all these crash retrievals and stuff, we're probably not going to divulge how we did it. And if somehow they have managed to cohere energy out of the 0 point, the quantum vacuum, if that's been figured out at this point, then nobody would want that spread out to any of the adversary nations or any non-adversary nations, because now you're messing with something that's really limitless energy, and that's a pretty scary thing. But if we could do that, then you wouldn't need anywhere to refuel. You're just sucking literally an infinite amount of energy that's out there. You're cohering what you need to do whatever you need. And if electromagnetic propulsion is actually how these things work, then the speed of light wouldn't be a speed limit anymore, because you're not moving through space. You're basically jumping into another realm at those energy levels. So I don't find that the long-held arguments that, well, it will take too long for anybody to get here. And who says that, they didn't figure this out? And who says that a lot of what they're sending are not AI controlled, even though they kind of look like smaller versions of humans? What if they're just like a biological AI device, a robot? And sometimes there's been beings that are described as like the Nordics that are very, very strikingly similar to us. Are they related to us? Are they responsible some way for the human population that's here now? Are they future humans? Who knows? I mean, there's all these theories out there. So it's so fascinating that, yeah, I would love to have more revealed. I would like an official government acknowledgement that we're not alone. And maybe some of this stuff, the reality of it is a little too scary for a lot of people. So you don't want to cause mass panic. So how do you do it in a controlled fashion? And I would say that we are currently doing it in a controlled fashion. Nobody has said that age of disclosure can't be shown publicly. And there's going to be a lot of things revealed in there just from the clips we've seen, the kind of the preview clips. But yes, I would like to have science advance, but just like we don't put out there for everybody to look and copy and read about and understand, we don't give the secrets of how thermonuclear weapons are made. We're not the only country that's figuring it out, but imagine if they were just out there for anybody to go.
But we can study nuclear physics. You can go to any university and study nuclear physics.
Yes, nuclear physics is okay. So if there's physics that doesn't allow us to stay trapped in this paradigm that gravity is the only force in the universe, and therefore, and the speed of light's the absolute speed limit. The speed of light isn't even constant. It's different in water, different in the medium. So the speed of light itself varies, but speed of light's not the ultimate speed limit sign. I don't believe. I think that faster than light travel is possible, but I think that the physics and science behind that is being closely held. Now, I would like the physics and science part to be accessible. Maybe withhold how you cohere energy out of the zero-point vacuum so that doesn't literally cause some idiot to destroy the world by creating a device that coheres so much energy and vaporizes it.
Dan, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this interview. Let my audience know where they can find you.
Yeah, well, I'm on X as Dan Isbell, at Dan Isbell on X. Hit me up, follow me, and if anybody wants to follow me and ask me some questions over direct messaging, then I'll reach back out to them.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.